the world is to solve the emergencies of climate change, the loss of species, and the growing risks of natural resource scarcities, humanity needs to transform across its economies and its communities. The best bet for a sustainable future is a rapid switch to a circular economy in which nothing is wasted, in which society mimics the wonder and the efficiency of nature. The world is making great strides across many crucial sectors as part of worldwide efforts to combat climate change and meet the safety goals of the landmark Paris Agreement of 2015. Renewable energies like wind and solar are now doubling every, say, 3 years, globally. And today, these clean energies are competitive with fossil fuels in many parts of the globe. Government policy has played a central role in this story. Germany, from where we are broadcasting today, was an early pioneer of wind and biomass and then solar energy. Its share of renewable energies rose from just 3.4% of gross electricity consumption in 1990 to exceed 10% by 2005 and reaching over 40% of consumption in 2019. Policy decisions by the government made much of this possible and also fired up technological creativity among its businesses. Indeed, Germany's leadership inspired many others to take big leaps of faith in this sector, including nations like China. Sweden, too, has been a beacon of leadership. Its policies made it one of the first, if not the first nation, to decouple growth from carbon emissions. And that happened as early as in the mid-1990s. Again, this didn't happen by chance. It was made possible by clear and determined government policy. Other things are moving, again fueled by government policy. The electrification of transportation is now underway, with rapidly tightening targets devolving from decisions at UN climate conferences and coming into national policy in many, many countries. In the European Union, for example, sales of new cars and vans powered by fossil fuels will be banned from 2035, if not sooner. At the recent UN climate conference, COP27, hosted by the government of Egypt, there was a rapid practical and political awakening of another key area, and that's the environmental, economic, and human health benefits of what is called regenerative agriculture. Watch this space. The big prize, however, is for economies to move from these sectorial targets and timetables to this fully circular approach. And to date, only around 8 to 9% of the world is circular. One missing link is the recovering, recycling, and reusing of natural resources that in the past have come almost exclusively from sources such as mines in often faraway regions. Think metals like iron and copper and zinc, and the metals now being used in the batteries for the electric car revolution. Today, in a special episode of the Circular Table Talks, we will spotlight a perhaps less well-known but nevertheless crucial area, focusing around the harvesting of substances like phosphorus from waste water flows. We will hear about breakthroughs that have already been made in, for example, Sweden and elsewhere that show it can be done, and indeed is being done. But equally important, we will focus on the critical importance of government policy that in some European countries is still lagging behind the technical and the technological breakthroughs that have already occurred. Phosphorus is not a marginal topic. It is vital for European agriculture and food production and industry. Today, it is currently produced and shipped from mines with significant carbon footprints and long, some might say vulnerable supply chains against a background of shifting and perhaps increasingly uncertain geopolitics. Along with other useful materials like nitrogen compounds, the phosphorus is discharged from water treatment works and washed away down rivers and out to sea, where it can trigger dead, deoxygenated zones with impacts on fisheries and the general marine environment. Policymakers in Europe now have the choice of allowing this to continue and waste one big opportunity to become more self-sufficient with phosphorus, or to embrace breakthroughs in recycling and reuse, and in doing so, further the ambitions of Europe's green circular transition. and in doing so, show leadership not only here, but inspire leadership elsewhere in the world on the circular economy with long-lasting benefits to the environment, the economy, jobs, and livelihoods now and into the future. Let me first thank the Swedish Embassy in Berlin for hosting this broadcast, and let me now introduce our terrific guests for today's special episode of the Circular Table Talks, brought to you by the Swedish broadcaster We Don't Have Time and the Swedish environmental company Ragn-Sells. And let me also mention to the viewers, could you download the We Don't Have Time app at wedon'thavetime.org, and then you can pose questions to the guests and interact with them during this broadcast. Firstly, we're absolutely delighted and honoured to welcome His Excellency Per Thöresson, who is the Swedish ambassador to Germany, and we'd like to hear some opening remarks from him. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to host you, and I think this discussion is extremely important. I would also say there's a strong case for the two countries, Sweden and Germany, to work together. Both innovative, both with real ambitious climate plans, wanting to become climate neutral by 2045. I sometimes say that, if we join forces, we have up in the north a very innovative country, leading most measurements in international polls. And to the south, we have the masters of quality and process. And if we can join those together, we will have an offer to the world market that no one can beat. And we've already established quite a good cooperation. In 2017, we signed an innovation partnership for a sustainable future, including e-road systems, e-health, AI, test beds. We're also planning to add maybe space and hydrogen. So this is very, very much alive. There's much going on, and there seems to be a perfect match between Swedish and German companies. We sort of think alike, and when we join forces, it's really good. And the circular part of it is, of course, extremely vital. As an example, I would mention Northvolt with its new factory up in Skellefteå, planning to be, will be the first green battery factory, also with recycling of lithium and things like that. And this is very much in the Swedish gene. So I think we have a very good opportunity to work together on these issues.
Absolutely, Ambassador. I've worked for a few years for the We Don't Have Time people out of Sweden, and I'm always astounded at the amount of creativity happening in that country, and with so many challenges facing the world, but so many creative ideas coming from Sweden. So absolutely. So thank you, Ambassador. Please stay with us for the show. That's great. Next we have up Jan Svärd, who is the CEO of the Swedish company EasyMining, which has played a central role behind the development of the technologies that are making nutrient recovery possible from wastewater streams. Jan, over to you for a few opening remarks.
Yeah, just a few words about EasyMining and what it is. It's quite interesting. It was a small company, a real startup. That was a man moving from Israel to his Swedish mother and Israeli father, and they started a company at the SLU, the Agricultural University in Sweden, and when he did his PhD. And he wanted to create a phosphorus product that was really clean, based on dirty raw materials. So detoxification is part of our genetic display, so to say. It's very important to create something that's very clean. Then basically he worked alone for several years, needed financing, of course, and then in comes the company Ragn-Sells, that is today is 100% owner of EasyMining. So you need, a very innovative person, you need a strong financer that's really long term. And then on top of that, of course, you can't do it alone. So what has been created since then is a real process. We have a set of really strong engineers. We actually have 10 nationalities in our team. Really, we have now the solutions. Of course, we need a lot more to get there, but we have the basic fundamentals for really going in for business now.
Super, very interesting, thank you. We've also got with us Christian Kabbe, who is the Managing Director of EasyMining here in Germany. And Christian, yeah, give us a few little opening remarks from your side.
Yeah, I got married to the phosphorus topic back in 2008 when I joined the German EPA and was involved in shaping and drafting the first roadmap for resource efficiency and covering the phosphorus part. And already then there were discussions, should peer recovery be mandatory for, let's say, certain waste streams like sewage sludge or animal bone residues, etc. So, and that led me via the authority perspective, also in the utility perspective, and finally I ended up back in 2017 at EasyMining, where I hope to transform all the know-how in my head into reality of circular economy.
Great. When you say the EPA, you're talking about the Environmental Protection Agency of Germany, yes?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Umweltbundesamt.
Exactly, yeah. Good. And last but by no means least, we have Per Larshans. Per is the Director of Sustainability at the Ragn-Sells Group and recently appointed as the co-chair of a working group on the circular economy under the International Chamber of Commerce. Congratulations, Per. Yeah, you have the floor for your opening remarks.
Yes, thank you so much. And we talk about a technique that is now ready to be launched. The challenge, though, is that policymakers around the world doesn't understand the potential or fear because the origin is waste. So what I see is that we need a new perspective. We need to go from a waste thinking to a resource thinking. And if we don't do that, if we go in and focus on phosphorus, by 2100, there will just be one mine left in the world, and that's the Moroccan phosphorus. So we need to start recycling. Why? Because without phosphorus, there's no life. There will be no food production. And of course, that will create huge challenges going forward. So we need to make sure that policymakers understand the critical moment to start acting and not just talking. But we are ready. We have the technique here presented by Svärd. We are ready to roll out. And the first plant is already now on the table here to be set up in Germany. So we are really looking forward to have it in Germany. And I think Germany might be one of the countries that are the forerunner. They have put the decision in place to make sure that phosphorus are not wasted anymore. And that I would like to see on a global level, of course, going forward.
Because, as they say, we don't have time. And we need to move faster and shorten the distance between ideas and the actual implementation. Yeah, exactly. Okay, we're now going to take a deeper dive into this topic, the topic of the day, looking at the potential of phosphorus recovery and how we need to shift the political policy and the practical mindset to make it happen faster everywhere. Before we start, let us hear from an international expert on this issue. His name is Dr. Will Brownlee of the UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology based in Scotland. Will is an internationally renowned freshwater scientist, has co-authored several landmark scientific papers with others on phosphorus recovery and the opportunities, and is a member of the Global Nutrient Cycles Project funded by the United Nations Environment Programme, UNEP. The recording we're about to play comes from Wilf's participation at the recent UN Climate Conference, COP27, in a 2-hour session with the theme From Wastewater Treatment Plant to Resource Plants. So, Will, over to you. Great to see you.
Hi, Nick, and thanks for a really interesting talk just previously, Caroline. So, currently, we have a global phosphorus emergency. It's threatening food security, it's destroying our water quality. This is a significant, urgent global crisis. Impacts are not only planet changing, they're also contributing to the climate crisis, the current food crisis, and the current financial crisis. But when I mention phosphorus in the pub, I get, what is phosphorus? So to me, this makes phosphorus the emergency even more scary because people don't know that it's happening. And currently, you know, it's being blatantly ignored in policy circles. You know, there's no global policy on phosphorus. There's no UN resolution on phosphorus. It's hardly mentioned in the SDGs. The few national policies on phosphorus that do exist are highly fragmented and deal with only part of the problem. So currently, for me, I feel our politicians are either completely unaware of the issues, or if they are aware, they feel that they are not a priority, or that they don't have the capacity to deal with them. So for this, phosphorus is not in the spotlight. It's nowhere near the spotlight. So I'm going to tell you now why this needs to change. And it's not all doom and gloom. Addressing phosphorus sustainability is an incredible opportunity. It can help fix multiple global issues simultaneously. So first, what is phosphorus? Why should we care? Phosphorus is essential for food security because it is an essential part of fertilizer. And in a way, the way that we farm at the moment, most of the phosphorus we use comes from phosphate rock. However, 4 countries have 80% of the planet's phosphate rock reserves. 70% is in Morocco and Western Sahara alone. Therefore, food production for most of us, for most countries, relies on phosphorus imports. However, reserves aren't relative to production. China contains 5% of global reserves. In 2021, China produced 40% of global phosphates. 17% came from Morocco, 10% came from the US, 6% came from Russia. However, since 2020, things have gone crazy. Phosphorus commodity prices have spiked by over 400%. So, part of this was the pandemic, the trade wars, the Russian-Ukraine conflict, of course, escalating fuel prices. It's all made this possible. And at the moment, China's not exporting fertilizers. Russia is not exporting fertilizers. Trade restrictions threaten about 20% of the global fertilizer trade. That's around 50% of fertilizer supply for 24 countries. So in 2009, it was estimated 1 in 7 farmers couldn't access enough phosphorus fertilizer to grow enough crops. The situation now is, of course, much worse, and it's contributing to the food crisis. In May 2022, the president of the World Farmers Association said in an online talk, whether in North America or Oceania, even in the Ukraine and Russia, the main talk amongst farmers is fertilizer, the availability and the price. So where do we see this going in the future? Well, if Russia, China and US keep mining at their current rates, based on the reserves as reported in 2021, which will probably change, but at the moment, if they carry on mining at current rates, their phosphorus reserves will be used up in the next 45 years. So is the future Morocco as the gatekeeper of the global food production? That is a huge challenge and responsibility for one country to carry. So that's having enough phosphorus. It's essential for food security. At the other end of the scale, too much phosphorus is a threat to water security. So just as it boosts crop growth, excess phosphorus in our rivers and our lakes and seas boosts algal growth, which can rapidly escalate into huge toxic algal blooms. And these are known to kill aquatic life, cause mass mortalities of fish, destroy aquaculture and fisheries, poison drinking water supplies, and most of this pollution comes from fertilizer overuse and poor sanitation. And it's mainly due to poor phosphorus management, stakeholder negligence, and government inaction. And if these emissions are not reduced, impacts will be irreversible. In some cases, they already are. Biodiversity loss in freshwaters is higher than in any other planetary domain. And between 1970 to 2014, freshwater fauna declined by 83%. So currently over 25% of all freshwater species are threatened with extinction. And it's not just our freshwaters that are being harmed. The Baltic Sea, Chesapeake Bay, the Gulf of Mexico, all considered marine dead zones due mainly to nutrient pollution. Even the Great Barrier Reef is being destroyed by phosphorus pollution. And it's not just the environment, people are being impacted by this. Half of the world's population is reliant on aquaculture for 20% of their animal protein intake. And aquaculture is being severely impacted by phosphorus pollution again. And algal blooms are also poisoning our drinking waters. Even rich countries with water treatment are being impacted. In 2014, in the US, in Ohio, 500,000 people were ordered not to drink or even touch their water because of toxins from harmful algal blooms in Lake Erie. And those same algal blooms you can see from space on Lake Erie each year. And the phosphorus pollution on Lake Erie is getting worse with climate change.
Will,
phosphorus pollution
Will,
is costing.
can I just
Yes.
come to you from COP27? I'm just getting
Yeah.
a whispering in my ear that we're a bit over time. So I want to come back to you. I think you've set up why phosphorus is so important. And I think
Yep.
you've also set up the inefficient use of phosphorus into our marine environments, but also our freshwater environments, is a major challenge in other ways. So I'm sure that we're going to get logically to the point that we must, for security reasons of our phosphorus for farming, but also for taking the heat, as it were, the stress off our marine environment and freshwaters, that we need to recover this phosphorus, yeah? And I think that's probably where you're heading. But I suppose we've got an audience out there that now has learned those facts. Let me ask you a question. If we recover the phosphorus we need from, say, water treatment works by resource treatment plants, if we could do that, and that's clearly now possible because of some of the great work that's happening in the Nordic region and elsewhere, what would we do about the other phosphorus that we don't have? Because we'll get maybe 40% or something in Europe if we maximize this. Can we get it by more, say, regenerative farming techniques or something like that? Or are we always going to need phosphorus provided to the farmer?
So I think you're asking, can we do without phosphate rock?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, what I was going to is the next point. Is that there is a report that we've worked on, that you've mentioned, the Our Phosphorus Future Report. 500 scientists signed a Helsinki Declaration calling for action on that. 100 scientists committed to writing that report. And in that report, we talk about solutions. And you can get that report. It's on www.opfglobal.com. Within that report, we talk about phosphate rock, our need for phosphate rock. I don't think there's going to be a point where we will be able to exist without phosphate rock, but what we may be not talking about is improvements to efficiency here. We can replace some by recycling phosphorus, and in fact, the report lists 10 solutions to get there. So if I've got time there, Nick,
give us say the top 5 or whatever, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we increase the use of recycled phosphorus in our fertilizer. We avoid excess use of fertilizers. That's tightening up our efficiency. We optimize livestock diet, so they only consume the phosphorus they need to grow. There's savings to be made there. We improve global reporting and assessments of phosphorus emissions from different sectors. We implement integrated approaches to restore our polluted water bodies. And we ensure all farmers have sufficient access. And that might be access to recycled phosphorus, not just fertilizers made from phosphate rock. And the other thing that we're really not talking about COP27 enough is that shift to diets. A shift to a healthy, nutritious diet with a low phosphorus footprint is synonymous with a drop in meat consumption in many of the more richer nations. I mean, when we're coming down to it, we're talking about an increase in phosphorus recycling, improving use efficiency and reducing phosphorus losses. In the report, we talk about a 50-50-50 goal, which is a 50% reduction in phosphorus pollution and a 50% increase in the recycling of phosphorus loss. But really, what we need to do is we need to skip from those short-term measures to the long-term transformative change. And that means nations need to commit to real-time assessment of their phosphorus vulnerability. We need to accelerate a global transition to a circular economy, and we need to accelerate intergovernmental cooperation as a catalyst to change. Some countries are already doing that, but we need to plant those green shoots of progress across different countries.
Super, Will. Thank you so much indeed. Great. Super to hear from Will. A super presentation. Look, let me ask Dr. Christian Kabbe the first question. Christian, you're one of the authors of a scientific publication that looks at phosphorus, the issue of phosphorus anyway, from a German perspective. Can you tell the audience how important is phosphorus recovery in your opinion?
So yeah, I think the key message is phosphorus is the, let's say, limiting factor for all, let's say, biomass on the planet. So no life without phosphorus. And especially from the German perspective, we have to import all the phosphorus from somewhere else, so we don't have our own mines and reserves. So every phosphorus we consume has to come from somewhere else being mined beforehand. But at the same time, we spill a lot of phosphorus during the wastewater treatment plants, etc., ending up finally in the sea again, and then after millions of years, it's potentially be remined again. But that's of course not sustainable under current conditions, so we have to care for the phosphorus we already have in our, let's say, territory and make the most of it. So resource efficiency, I think, is key.
And we could talk longly about other materials as well, but this is just a glimpse into one at the moment. But in fact, the whole economies we have in Europe and elsewhere in the world have resources sitting right under their feet, either in wastewater streams or in rubbish tips. Some people say there's more iron above ground now than there is underground. I mean, I don't know if that's true, but it's certainly a headline. Good. Jan, you're here because you have a technique, right? This wonderful breakthrough technology that can be implemented in Germany to recover phosphorus and other critical substances we might touch on later. And I understand really all densely populated areas could benefit from this as an economic and an environmental solution to our challenges. As cities grow, and we know human beings are now more urban dwellers than they are rural dwellers, and the number of megacities increase, particularly in the developing world, in Asia and Africa and other things. Do you think this is a breakthrough whose time has come?
Yeah, I think absolutely it is key important, and as Christian and we will as well saying, phosphorus is important not only for one reason, it's for multiple reasons. One is, of course, eutrophication and the big environmental impact it has if we don't handle it right. So we need really to catch it in the wastewater treatment plants and so on for environmental reasons as well. Then, of course, there's also a health issue. A lot of the phosphorus that we today mine has high contents of cadmium, and of course naturally it also consists with uranium or fluorine and other nasty minerals. But cadmium is still, so we import into Europe because we import 90% of our phosphorus use into Europe from other regions. We import a lot of cadmium actually. Right. And that cadmium is one of these minerals, that you have it in the soil and then it's taken up by plants and then we eat it.
And that's not a good thing?
That's not a good thing. It's bone breaking and when you get older, and it's a lot of costs here. They're studied in France and in Sweden and many parts of Europe. So health issue is the second one. The other one is, of course, the geopolitical issue. So if we would recover in Europe all the phosphorus that is actually in wastewater treatment plants, we can replace all the imports from Russia today. And that's about 25%. For Germany, I think it's actually 55% or so. It's a really bigger number that is there. So of course this has big geopolitical consequences as well. So I think most big cities, most regions will have to create the situation where they are self-sufficient in generating their own phosphorus and don't just lose it.
Sure.
So I think the sense of urgency has increased, but of course still legislation is not promoting it. It's actually in some cases, you can't use it for the best available use, like animal feed. Even if it's cleaner than what is there today, you can't use it for the best available use. So here legislation needs to change.
Yeah. Per Larshans, you have just returned from COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, and it was also a great delight for us that we don't have time to have you on some of our shows, so thank you. What do you take from what Will Brownlee said in his recorded interviews and also from what you've heard from our colleagues here? Do you think the issue of the circular economy and harvesting and recovering materials like phosphorus came to the attention of policymakers at this big global conference?
It was not part of the negotiations, but it really was a big part of many side sessions at COP. And food security were for the first time highlighted at the COP, and the need to make sure that we can produce the food that the population will need, because if we can't do that, we have social stress. The phosphorus thing, what Will really also said was that we thought that we had the phosphorus situation under control, but due to that the temperature is rising in the world, we have a higher risk also for eutrophication, and that will lead to algae blooms. And when you have more algae blooms, it ends up in huge amount of methane leakage, and that's not accounted for. So we are at the tipping point. If we can't get out the phosphorus out of the water, and reuse it, of course, then we are facing even higher temperatures going forward. So I think that is a key message. But then, of course, I was extremely happy to see the big interest for food security, and the only thing I was missing, that people believe they're going to just produce more food, but without phosphorus, without nutrients, there will be no more food production. So that really was not connected fully.
No, it's a good point you make, and I think I remember talking to Will Brownlee before COP27, and he said there are now lakes in different parts of the world that they thought they'd, in a sense, detoxified from potassium and other substances that were causing these algal blooms, which also emit methane, don't they, these algal blooms, which is another greenhouse gas. And he said they're finding that as the temperatures rise in the lakes, or the water flows go down and the water quantity in the lakes goes down, suddenly they're realizing that the little phosphorus maybe that's left in some of those lakes is enough now to trigger more algal blooms again, causing more damage and more methane emissions. So it is a vicious circle. We need to break this circle and get to the more advantageous circle of the circular economy.
And we will end up in dead seabeds. And with dead seabeds, you will have no more fish production.
Yeah,
so,
that's right.
So it's a even bigger problem.
Yeah, and the fish don't need any more stress in the world's oceans. They're already overfished as well, so they don't need any extra damage. Yeah. The full 2-hour session of COP27 started off a new circular process to be implemented into the society. A collaboration in Sweden between WWF, the environmental NGO, the Swedish Farmers Association, Swedish Water, and EasyMining ended up in a recommendation that today's wastewater treatment plants should be given a new task as resource plants. The suggestion was handed over to the previous Minister of Industry in Sweden, and kind of almost simultaneously from the European Environment Agency, a similar recommendation of basically turning wastewater treatment plants into resource plants was handed over to the EU Commission in July this year. Let us listen to Caroline Worley of the European Environment Agency on these recommendations that were made by her important agency to the EU Commission about phosphorus. And we are now going to turn our attention to the European Environment Agency. In July, the European Environment Agency came up with a report with the focus that water treatment plants should produce more resources. Very similar to what we've just heard, and almost the same recommendation as Per Larshans and others gave to the Swedish Minister of Industry in the previous government. So what we'd like to do now is come in to listen to Dr. Caroline Worley, or Worley, because she's English, I can now say it in an English name rather than in a sort of quasi-Nordic or German fashion. Caroline is an environmental specialist with the European Environment Agency, and she can tell us what is happening in Europe with this whole issue of resource treatment plants rather than water treatment plants. Hello, Caroline, coming in on the magic of Zoom.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for the introduction, and thanks for the very interesting talks I've heard are already going on. So I work on chemicals in and emissions to water at the agency. And what I'm going to do is give you a very short introduction to sewage and urban wastewater treatment in Europe. You've already heard some interesting things that are going on, and you're going to hear some more later on, so it's great. And I'm just giving you this slide to start off with as a taster, as a sneak preview. I hope I've got time to tell you about it at the end, just to basically understand that it's a very exciting time to be working in this area right now. So next slide, please. Thanks. So I think there's loads of exciting stuff going on, but we must remember the primary reason to treat sewage is to protect human and environmental health. And that goal mustn't be, you mustn't lose sight of that very important activity that is the primary reason we treat sewage. And what you can see in this slide, I hope, is the levels of treatment in 2018 for plants reporting under the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive, which is the European Union legislation. And from the green and blue colours, you can see that most countries treat their wastewater to secondary or even more stringent treatment. And by more stringent treatment, we mean it's got higher standards for nutrients, particularly nitrogen and phosphorus. And what we can see is that 82% of sewage is treated to the required level in Europe or in the EU. And there's just another little flag beyond the what are we doing sewage treatment for? The other one is that options for sewage treatment need to be local. We just heard about some of the solutions need to be local. Exactly. What's appropriate for a large city in a rich area, it's flat, that might not be the right solution from a rural area or where people are rather dispersed and they're living in mountains. So we have to think about what's the local situation before we can say what treatment options might be available. Next slide, please. Okay, so we just heard that the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive, 1991 directive, it's now under revision. So the European Commission published a proposal in October with very wide-ranging proposals, and I'm just going to give you a couple of highlights here. So next slide, please. Okay, so for water pollution, the proposals addressing areas found still to represent pollution problems in the EU, and things like stormwater overflows, where we've got intense rainfall just washes everything without any treatment into our surface waters. So there's various solutions around that. And then in terms of resources, you've heard some ideas already, but some of the Commission proposals are around reaching energy neutrality of treatment, better use of sludge and treated water, for example. So this would apply to the EU 27 member states and other people that want to follow that legislation. This is very expensive treatment, but that's the direction of travel to meet the goals that we need to under the European Green Deal. Next slide, please. So what's happening? You heard it before, but what's happening is we're moving the conversation to think about urban wastewater treatment plants as being resource hubs, not just waste management or at the end of the line, someone's got to do something with it over there. No, it's integral to a circular economy. And before we even go to that point, something we can all do, we can start with today, is become more water efficient. Moving water around, abstracting it, moving it to us, then taking it away and treating it, that all takes energy. We can do that in our local scale and at bigger scale in our offices, in our schools and colleges. And being more water efficient is also going to help us address the key challenge of water availability, which is getting really quite challenging under climate change. You're going to hear about other sorts of talks that are talking about how to recover nutrients, wastewater heat, biogas from treatment, and how greenhouse gas losses during treatment can be reduced. But changes to more sustainable practice need action, and it's not just from water managers. We need planners, we need chemicals makers, and many others to contribute to making our wastewater more usable. And as individuals, we can think carefully about what we're flushing down the sink. So, because then if you chuck down chemicals or harmful substances, those then have to be taken out to make that water safe, and that takes energy and so forth. Let's move to the next slide, please. So this one, returning to this option about thinking about smaller scale and decentralized treatment. Why? Because typically big sewage networks and plants are very expensive, and they involve a lot of greenhouse gases embedded in steel and concrete pipes and plants. But there are other less intensive ways to treat the sewage safely. Decentralized techniques such as reed beds, they can safely treat sewage to quite a high standard. And that such techniques can be used at house, street, and up to sort of smaller urban areas. And they can give access to sanitation where you haven't got access to, plants at the moment. And these sorts of techniques can have multiple benefits: flood alleviation, green space, and improvements in local biodiversity. So then back to the final slide, please. Here we are, circular as we are. Applying circular economy principles leads to local treatment and recycling of water, nutrients, energy. And this top example in the Netherlands is on a brownfield site near Amsterdam, and they're hoping to scale it up to 8,000 people as a town or a new area. And you can find many similar projects worldwide. But in Europe, we've got commitments for net zero emissions at municipal, regional, and country level. And these commitments are driving innovation. Anders and the others have talked about Scandinavia, but here are examples from Scotland and from Bulgaria. So just to summarize, treatment of urban wastewater is well developed in much of Europe, but our ambitions have now increased beyond health and water quality to tackle climate change and work towards a circular economy. There's now a legislative proposal to formalise these ambitions throughout the European Union. Thanks for listening.
Good. Well, that was great to hear from Caroline, such an expert, yeah? Jan, thinking about what Caroline has said and how these recommendations have been handed over to the Commission, which is a policy-making body, what is your kind of response to that? What are you looking for from this?
No, I think this can really happen, but, you know, to make them resource plans, you need to, you know, business wants it, farmers wants it, technology is available, and the only country that so far has started their legislative path is Germany and Switzerland to some extent, and maybe Austria in Europe. And you need this type of base legislation that you must recover phosphorus and you must detoxify. So that is still missing. You know, they need to change from a linear thought process to a circular thought process. And I think that is the key element to make these resource plans really work. It's not a waste, it's a resource. Need to be treated like other resources.
Can I ask you just another question here? I mean, what happens when you talk to some of the other governments in Europe? I mean, what happens when you talk to the Swedish government, for example? It's in your...
Yeah, no, so Swedish government have talked about this for 20 years. And, you know, just as an example, we are planning a plant like this in Sweden. We applied for the environmental permits in 2018. It's still not settled. So there is no sense of urgency in many of these. Of course, now with the war in Ukraine, that is changing because now impact
focusing
is so big.
Mines, maybe. Yeah.
So a bit more focus, and I think it's in Sweden. It's 5 investigations ongoing on how you're gonna source nutrients now when this war is happening as well. But of course, and this is an obvious solution to recover what you already have. So I think the leadership here, and that's of course why we focus on Germany, is Germany has taken the decision to do a legislation. Of course, the implementation is not until 29. So it's still some years left, and will not resolve something in the short term, but we need to start, so we are late.
Right. Christian, Germany seems to be moving a bit faster on this. What's your perspective there?
Of course, it was not an overnight decision and development to have this peer recovery targets, let's say, nailed down in the sludge ordinance, which was launched in 2017. So there's also a 10 years transition period, or even 12 years transition period included, which of course is also necessary to do all the investments. But with this regulation in place, now companies and utilities have the security to do the right investments. So they have the, let's say, guiding boundaries, or the road was paved. And now it's up to the utilities and companies to do the investments and make this peer recovery happen. But of course, recovery is one thing. To close the nutrient cycle, you also need the recycling as such, so the application of the recovered materials. So that's still lacking. And we hope that also, let's say, the relevant governmental bodies are recognizing this kind of urgency now, because otherwise we will recover a lot of material. But as Jan already explained, cannot use as good as possible. So,
right. So you'd be taking a waste product, turning it into a high quality product, but only being able to use it in low quality processes, which doesn't make sense. Okay.
We still have this, let's say, outdated paradigm from the past, discrimination of application of certain materials by origin and not only by quality. I think the future is only
in other words, they prefer
matters.
It from the mines at the moment than actually from the wastewater recoveries. Ambassador, I wouldn't dream of asking you to comment on Swedish policy in terms of this, but you do have a leading company here that's really doing some amazing things, not just with phosphorus, but many things in the wastewater. It sounds like it could be something that Sweden could take to the world, along with all the other great inventions that come out of your country. I suppose the interesting thing for maybe the viewers is, what is the role of an embassy? What is the role of an ambassador in a sense, championing around the world in this case you're in Germany, but I know you were at the United Nations in New York before and other places I'm sure before that. What is your role to get these things to the attention of other governments?
Well, it's actually one example is to take part in broadcasts like this. And you're absolutely right. Sweden has a huge potential to take a lead in this and many other areas. We're a big country, we have lots of resources, but we're too small to do it alone. And that's why I see these partnerships, especially with Germany. But I also see this as a European issue. We're talking about, not decoupling, but diversification when it comes to raw materials. And of course, we need to do this lesson here in Europe. And if Sweden, can trigger something and work with Germany, I see a wonderful business case.
Absolutely, absolutely. Per, a couple of thoughts on this whole policy landscape?
I think it's crucial to listen to the European Environmental Agency, and they are really very strong. So I think that the Commission are listening to them. So hopefully now we go from talking to action. And we see that the phosphorus product that we will be able to produce are the absolutely highest quality you can find on the planet. There's nothing better on the market. And so it means that it's perfect fit as a feed phosphate, and it's also very good as use in organic farming, if we would be allowed to use it.
Yeah.
And I know that Europe has a huge ambition to increase the organic production. But of course, then you need to add on nutrients, otherwise you will reduce food production. And we talk about food security here as a key thing. And I agree with the ambassador that partnership is the thing going forward. And that is also what we're aiming for in each and every country where we are setting up our future setups. We can't do that by ourselves. We need to have partnership with the wastewater plant. We need to have partnership with the companies that are buying our phosphorus or anything else that we also extract from the process. So partnership, the policymakers to understand the potential, but also the crucial thing to act now. So I really hope now the European Commission listen to Caroline and her colleagues, of course, and start focusing on that one. I hear some signs now that the Commission are saying, well, we need to enable more use of phosphorus. And to be honest, the second best phosphorus quality in the world are the Russian phosphorus. So therefore we can replace the Russian phosphorus with our quality that is even much better, and it will be good for both Europe, but also good for the food security situation.
And just briefly, because this issue of quality and origin and this kind of tension between the two, I mean, you have been involved with trials of these phosphorus products with farmers and research centres in Sweden, to show that if you actually give it to livestock or whatever, give it to animals, it's not a problem, right?
No,
so
we have proven that this is a perfect fit. We can bring it back and we can replace today's use of feed phosphate with our raw material. And so it's proven.
Yeah.
And also it's a slow release, which means that it's a perfect fit for organic farming. I think John can detail.
No, and just to say that this is not us really. We have it's independent research,
Right.
third-party research
Okay.
that has proven this. So it's
Yeah.
it's and even some parts is financed by others. So
Yeah.
so it's really verified in a scientific way.
That's a good point.
But
Good
the
point.
challenge that you are saying is that today's thinking when it comes to policymakers is that it is origin that determines what you can use. It's not the quality. And that needs to be changed. We need to have a resource thinking instead of a waste thinking.
Yeah.
Because people are afraid. We don't want waste. So it ends up that we are flushing it out into our oceans because then we can hide it away. But we can't do that anymore. We need to care for it.
That's unfortunately very old-fashioned thinking. This is something we can't do. We've stopped putting radioactive materials in the sea, and so we shouldn't be putting other things into that cause damage. Let's just get a little bit back to the phosphorus and the Germany thing. Christian, I think you touched on this a little bit before, but it was assessing the phosphorus potential in Germany. You arrive at some quite significant numbers. How did you arrive at, or who arrived at these calculations? How did you get to these numbers?
So there is, of course, a lot of scientific literature, but also the German Statistical Office, I think, is doing a great job tracking at least the main flows. Of course, would be nice to have also regional resolutions, etc. But to get the grip on the total flow, I think it's good enough. And so we know the sludge production in Germany. So it's in dry solids around about 1.7 million tons a year. So it was slightly reducing over the past years. Might be slightly increasing again once the advanced tertiary treatment is implemented widely. But in the end, that's a reliable figure. We can base on our recovery, let's say, potentials, and then of course also the capacities we have to install. And if I look at the ash-based recovery, so Germany is actually the biggest sludge ash producer in Europe at the moment, and will be in the future as well. So given the regulation implemented in 2017, the overall dedicated sludge incineration quantity or capacity is supposed to double to around about 1.2 to 1.4 million tons dry solids, which is then giving ash volumes in the range of 600 or even 700,000 tons. And if we base the P content or recovery potential on an average value of 9%, then we are in the range of roughly 50,000 tons of P. And then if I compare this to the P used in mineral fertilizers in Germany, which is a figure in the range of 100,000 tons a year, then we are in the 50% replacement or substitution potential. And if you bring it also to the quality aspect, being based on Russian appetite, then we could even replace 100% of these type of imports if our technology would be applied for all those volumes.
All right, and just remind the viewers, P is phosphorus, not PP, that is also in wastewater as well. Hopefully not too much either of that. So thanks, Christian. What we're going to do now is we want to hear from Christoph Onted, who's from Gelsenwasser. And this is a utility in Germany. He was at COP27, and he was talking about the need to have a phosphorus focus, and these kinds of partnerships that are evolving with Gelsenwasser. So let's hear from Christoph. And in Germany, Christoph, where are you with this activity?
Yeah, thanks, Nick. We are in a partnership with EasyMining. This Phosphorgewinnung Schkopau is the company we try to build the first large plant for phosphorus recycling from sewage sludge incineration ash in Germany with this ash to phos process from EasyMining, and we are still in the phase that we end the planning and looking forward in the next year starting up the building of the plant. And we are a lot of challenges to do until this, but we are very confident that we'll overcome these challenges and start building the plant starting end of next year, perhaps.
Okay, great. Super, great to hear from Christoph. Christian, what's your comment on what Christoph was saying in terms of what is happening at Gelsenwasser? Is this really encouraging?
Yes, definitely. So it's, I think we have the same chemistry and same vision. And I think the big advantage in our partnership now is that Gelsenwasser is operational in all Germany. So not just in one region. So we have a rollout partner for our technologies in the whole country. And they are also covering the whole water cycle. So it's not only a wastewater utility, so they are also drinking water supplier. And I think that's also crucial for them that the recovered materials do not harm the environment, and then in the end also the drinking water supply of the future.
And of course, it's in the interest of a country to take this seriously, not only from the phosphorus point of view, but from the climate point of view. I mean, every country's got a target that they're supposed to meet on climate change, and every little percentage here and there adds up to an ability to meet those targets. So what's happening with Gelsenwasser, rolling this out into Germany is going to help the German the German government meet its climate targets as well. So, you know.
Yes, it will definitely be a contribution. Of course, still not solidly to be quantified, but there will be a positive impact.
Yeah, good. Jan?
No, the point I would like to make there is, of course, typically circular economy, you know, it's new value chains or value circles or what you should call them, and you can't really do it alone. So, of course, when we realized that we need to get into Germany, because this will be the first market for our innovation, then we, you know, intently really looked for partners, and we choose them and they choose us, I guess. Who was first, I don't really know. But they have made their investigation, what's the best available technologies for this, because Gelsenwasser wanted to be early. They don't want to wait until 29, because I think this is a big risk for many utilities in Germany, that they wait until, you know, 27, 26 or whatever to be ready to 29, and then everybody wants the solution at the same time. It will be kind of a gap like this.
Just clear that up for those that don't know. Why is 2029 an important date?
So 2029 is the year when all larger wastewater treatment plants need to have installed phosphorus recovery by law. Somewhat smaller needs it at 2032. So of course, you know, it will be a rush, but then you need somebody who's ready to do it a bit earlier. And you want to scale up the technology, and not everything can happen in the last 2 years. So we've you know, really worked to try to find partners, and then of course in this technology we detoxify, we take out the iron, the aluminum, and other, and there we also have working on and looking and talking to different partners. But Gelsenwasser is most important one for us here.
Per, any comments on that?
No, I think it's interesting to see the partnership and how it has been developed. And we had a session here in Berlin here in November, and it was really interesting to see the huge interest. So many people from around the Germany that came and really wanted to listen to the potential. And I would say that Gelsenwasser is a perfect partner for us. And I believe the Gelsenwasser also believe that we are a perfect partner for them. And so this is now happening. So I'm extremely happy. And then, of course, in the long run, I would like to see this happen in New York. I would like to see it happen in Shanghai, and because the megacities have the real big problem, how to get the nutrients back to where the food is produced. And Germany will, together with the Swedish innovation, will lead the way.
No, these are all very good points, absolutely. And as you say, I mean, if suddenly 2029 comes around and suddenly everyone goes, oh yeah, you can have this, recycle this phosphorus, and then what are you going to do with it as well, which is the other point. And maybe some governments go by that time, well, maybe you should use it in a more sensible way. And then it's going to be a madhouse, isn't it? So it has to be a kind of, you know, smart transition, if we want to use the kind of jargon words for this. Okay, I want to know, okay, how big, Christian, is this first factory going to be? Where's it going to be? Are we all going to go around and cuddle it because it's just such a clever idea? Well, tell us about this first factory.
Yeah, the first factory is to be built in Schkopau, which is a chemical park southwest of Berlin. So around about 150 kilometers down south. And we'll have a treatment capacity for ashes in the range of 30,000 tons per year, giving us as the main product RevoCap. We have branded our calcium phosphate in a volume of 15,000 tons, but that's only supposed to be the first shot, so to say. And once we have demonstrated this plant works for all the ashes in Germany, we have the common intention together with Gelsenwasser to replicate this plant, or even with bigger capacities, to a total capacity of 300,000 tons a year, which then gives 150,000 tons of pure calcium phosphate. And besides that, also coagulants like ferric chloride, sodium aluminate, and detoxified sand, which can be used in construction materials, and heavy metal cake, which contains...
Heavy metal cake, you've got to tell me about that.
It's
is that something you have with coffee, or is it...
Yeah, of course, one of the unique selling points of our technology is really to separate the good stuff from the bad stuff, and the heavy metals are considered toxic elements and have to be, let's say, taken out of the circle. And to do this, you produce a filter cake, which then has to, in worst case, be disposed of, or in best case, can be also used in metallurgy, in smelting companies.
And could the cake come back in the future
there
for
are
circular use?
Yeah, there are certain elements in there, like copper, zinc, nickel, lead, etc., which are definitely valuable materials.
Okay. Jan, I always ask you to come back and comment on what Christian said. What do you think? Is this a good start?
Absolutely, and then of course I'm coming back to the pace. I mean, it's we need to get this started now. We need, and it's, you know, the permit application process in Germany is not so fast, and what is good and what is a good copy that should be done in other countries as well is that they use, I call it stick and carrot methodology in Germany.
Yes, I've heard of that.
And they really make a carrot because they create the market and saying that it's now possible, but there is also a drop in 29. So it's illegal to dispose of phosphorus after 29.
Okay.
So that's really, and then of course there is also a possibility if you're early in this process to get subsidies to get started, because of course this first plant is just 10% or 5% of the German requirements. So, you know, the second plant will be much more profitable than the first.
But will the second one happen if there isn't proper legislation and policy to use this high quality phosphorus in high quality activities, right? Or what's going to happen? You're going to stockpile the phosphorus and keep your fingers crossed that finally policymakers wake up? Or what have you worked this one out? What are you going to do?
Yeah, I honestly think, you know, so that's maybe my naive thought that the second one will definitely happen, but the one that's the biggest risk is always the first one. Yeah. Because when you approve the concept and it's sitting there and it's pumping up very pure products, then it's you know, then utilities and farmers who really wants to use these really much better things.
Yeah, but what you don't want is in generations to come, right? People visiting the plant, which is now closed down, because no policymakers came up with any good policy to actually use the pure stuff. And people say, well, we could have done this 50 years ago, and here's this museum that now tells us what a big failure we had.
Yeah. And then that's the big risk if you don't do this, change the legislation already for the first plant.
Okay, we've been getting a little bit technical here, right? We've been talking about the size of plants and other things. I hope the audience has stayed with us and has found the discussion interesting. But perhaps we can just now touch at the end, towards the end of this show. So it's not just about phosphorus, right? It's also about other materials coming out of wastewater plants, resource plants, in other words. We can't cover everything, but maybe we can just touch on nitrogen, because it's such a big story right now. I mean, you know, nitrogen's made from fossil fuels, and you know, the world seems to become very dependent on nitrogen in agriculture. There's a longer discussion we could have on whether we're using too much nitrogen on our land. But we do need some nitrogen, and we'd rather reduce our use of fossil fuels where it comes from. So if we could recycle it, bring it back, that would have some huge benefits. Not least, again, the ocean story, right? So as we all know, nitrogen is the other one that's triggering all kinds of dead zones and pollution in our seas. I understand at COP27, I wasn't there, I think I was busy somewhere else at the time, so I missed it maybe, I'm not sure. So much going on. There was an innovation on the nitrogen issue, and it's got a cute name, it's Aqua 2N. Can you tell us about it, Jan?
Absolutely, because it's such a nice story. While we worked on phosphorus, we looked at the planetary boundaries, pictures and so on, and we got the question, don't you have something for nitrogen as well? And then we built up this very skilled research lab with very smart people, and we come with a solution for nitrogen. And it's it's such a big story because nitrogen fertilizers is produced by natural gas and air, and of course there's a lot of fossil fuels in natural gas, as you know. So it's we looked at it's a business that's maybe $300 billion turnover or much more now with the high natural gas prices, and zero is recovered or recycled. You know, so it's a huge opportunity. And then we developed a bit further. We got money from EU to, so we paid 50 and they paid 50.
$50 or
50%.
Okay, fine.
Several millions of euro. We got, you know, we paid probably more than 50 to be honest. But and then right now we have it as a demonstration plant in Copenhagen, and it's been there since February this year. So
it's that new.
So it's that new, and it's ready to launch already now. So next year we want the first commercial part.
And so what you recover? What is the compound that comes back?
A fertilizer, ammonium sulfate. So which is a common fertilizer product that is farmers likes, and we actually placed already some of it and testing it on farmers' land. So it's already there. Of course, then it's one step to do it as a demonstration unit to do commercial, and that step we are just taking now.
Do you think it's going to be economic? Because of course we know that the synthetic nitrogen fertilizers that come around the world come from fossil fuels, which according to the International Monetary Fund are subsidized by $500, $600 billion a year.
Now it comes back to, again, what we do is we detoxify the reject water in a wastewater treatment plant, and that's something the wastewater treatment plants has to do anyway. So if you take that costs, then it will be very profitable, and it will also add to their energy balance. So they will actually produce, if you have a biogas plant there, you will produce more biogas if you take away nitrogen.
Aha, okay, that sounds really exciting. Okay, congratulations. What about Germany? Christian, are the Germans looking at nitrogen recovery?
Yes, for sure.
Okay.
And if you had a glance on the, let's say, just I think 2 weeks ago, the Commission circulated the new draft of the new Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive. So there are even more demanding requirements, especially if it comes to nitrogen removal in wastewater treatment plants. And yeah, to be honest, I don't like the term removal or elimination. So instead of getting rid of it, we have to really recover and recycle it. Harvesting, right? Yes. And make use of it. And I think only the sky is the limit in terms of application potential for these type of technologies.
Yeah. This is very interesting, isn't it? Per, from your perspective, why is it so important to deal with nitrogen?
Especially what we see is that, especially in the coastal areas around the planet, we are adding on more nitrogen, and this causes a toxic environment. So we need to take out the nitrogen from the wastewater. At the same time, we have the linear principle. It means that we are using the Haber-Bosch method to then produce today's nitrogen fertilizer. And I was participating in a session at COP27 together with both representatives from UNEP and from FAO, and also Professor Mark Sutton. And they were really clear. We need to start to recycle the nitrogen. We need to stop wasting the huge amount of money that we are doing today. And if we can't do that, we are facing a huge challenge going forward. And even Professor Sutton has even named the nitrogen in different colors. The black or the brown is when you have using fossil fuels. Then you have the green, that is from renewable energy. But still, you take it from the atmosphere. But what he now says is the most preferable way is to recover nitrogen and bring it back. So recycle nitrogen, recycle ammonia is the future. And this is exactly the solution that EasyMining is now put in place. Up to 99% of the nitrogen in the react water can be extracted and then produce a new nitrogen fertilizer. And of course, it's not 100% of what's going through a wastewater treatment plant. It's maybe up to 40% of the nitrogen in the react water. It's highly concentrated, and it really supports the wastewater treatment plant. And then, of course, in the next step, what we see is a huge potential for just in Europe. I think, Jan, you mentioned that there is a potential for 12,000 of these exactly copy of what we have now in Copenhagen. So the potential is enormous. And each of those plants will reduce the cost for the wastewater treatment plant.
Because there is one industry that doesn't really want you to do this, right? I mean, there's one industry that sees that in terms of energy, it's becoming more renewable in terms of, benzene or petrol or whatever for cars. That's changing as we get electric vehicles, and might have a business model to keep their products going through two things. One is nitrogen fertilizers and fresh, brand new plastics. So there may be some people lobbying around the Commission that say, no, don't listen to these crazy people from Sweden about their recycling of nitrogen, the Danish people. I mean, there always is a tension between old industries that don't want to see change and new ideas.
So maybe why this is also so relevant at COP. It is same researcher you mentioned, Professor Mark Sutton, he says that is 2% of the greenhouse gas emissions is from the direct production based on fossil fuels. So the ones that doesn't want it is the natural gas producers, of course. That's the big lobby, I would say. But the other part, which is also he's measuring and is in IPCC's reports and so on, they estimate that maybe 5% of the greenhouse gas emissions, carbon dioxide equivalents, so 5% is from laughing gas.
Yeah.
Produced because you don't recover.
Right.
So it's, pressures from all sides, emissions and eutrophication and greenhouse gas. It's a huge impact on greenhouse gas impact. So I think it's the only ones that really push is the natural gas producers.
Yeah. Good. Well, I think we're getting close to the end of this fascinating show, and maybe in this final session we can just maybe try and wrap up some of our thoughts here, because it's a complex topic, but I think actually everybody handled it very well. I think you decomplify. God, I can't even speak properly. Decomplexitized. Is that a word? Probably not in the English language. It's not the language.
You're the one that should know the English.
It's like Star Trek. It's Star Trek. It's a word, but not in my lexicon, Jim. Anyway. But Ambassador, you've been with us, and I thank you so much for being here throughout the show. Do you have any thoughts and conclusions about what you've heard today, in addition to maybe some of the other thoughts?
Yeah, I think the discussion has made it perfectly clear that we shouldn't wait for legislation. We cannot continue to consume almost 2 planets every year. We need to get started with a circular economy. We need to speed up the green transition. And I think the examples that we have listened to today are really important for us, and I wish EasyMining and Ragn-Sells all the best and good luck, because we need solutions like the ones you are providing.
Thank you, Ambassador. And best of luck with all the work that you do here, which I know is more than phosphorus and nitrogen, let's put it that way. Christian, so several years of hard work might soon pay off. Do you have any feelings about this? I mean, do you want to punch the air, or would you want to do a jig or yodel?
Yes,
or?
Once we have the first plant up and running, then I have left my footprint on the planet for the better.
A light footprint, very light footprint.
Very light. Of course, it will only be the first of many to come.
Yeah.
And today I would say innovation has always been an essential part of evolution, and as we all know, evolution cannot be escaped. It can only be slowed down by, let's say, outdated legislation.
Well, there's always that cliche that the Stone Age didn't end for lack of stones, because we all found something better to do with it.
Yeah, and in the end it was always a kind of pioneer who grabbed the first stone, tried something useful with it, and gave a good example, and then good examples are easy or happily copied in the end.
And then IBM invented the computer, or was it Manchester University? I can never quite remember. And the Stone Age was over. So, Christian, I've asked you a question. Let's go to Jan. So you started this journey in 2018, I think, yeah? Now we're here in 2022. So we seem to be close to realizing your dream as well, and also the recovery of other valuable materials in wastewater flows. What do you think? Are you feeling more optimistic than you were before?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we are on the right track. But of course, we all have the feeling that it's going too slow. We want legislators, they could act very quickly when COVID came.
True.
I heard Dutch energy minister say they also now, when Russian war or Ukraine war started, they were able to give the permit for LNG terminals, in the Netherlands in 6 months.
Yeah, liquid petroleum gas, yeah.
Yes. And so why can't we do it now? Let's really make sure that we get a pace and they also don't just talk circular, but actually act circular as well. That would be my dream.
Per, I think we have to go to you as well, as an incubator of many of these things that have been happening. And you're also now with the International Chamber of Commerce, of course, and a working group on the circular economy. There are other industries out there that are interested in the circular economy. And so is this an opportunity in your new role, but also with Ragn-Sells, to bring the circular economy into a faster trajectory?
Yeah, we do see a huge interest now globally for the circularity. And I can give you one concrete example. I was invited to do a keynote or lead the Swedish delegation to WTO in 2019. And after our speeches there, the chairman said, well, thank you so much, but to be honest, circular economy is to make sure it doesn't break the Basel Convention. Don't spread hazardous waste. 3 years later, after we have worked on the topic within the International Chamber of Commerce, presented a study that shows the barriers of in free trade when it comes to creating circularity. I was again invited to WTO in my own profession as Ragn-Sells. And after my presentation there in now May 2022, the chairman said, well, now we know that waste can also be resources and there's new technique available. And we talk about just 3 years. Normally a company is not invited to WTO because it's the trade organizations. So things are happening. And out the International Chamber of Commerce perspective, we are now having so many requests from different organizations that say, well, we heard about circular economy, but how do we do it? So now they turn to business. And business around the world are also asking for this to happen. And just a final comment, IPCC's report from April this year, for the first time mentions circularity as a key component for the industry to be able to deliver on the Paris Agreement. So now I would like to see it in the negotiations. I would like to see it in the national determined contributions from different countries. And then we will see a rapidly reduction of CO2 emissions. And that is what I would like to see going forward.
Well, I think that's absolutely right. And I think I tried to capture in the opening remarks that we are making great strides in certain areas, but the circular economy starts linking the dots together, doesn't it? Because there are gaps. You've got action on renewable energy, decarbonisation of transportation. They're in the circle there, but there are big gaps in the circle that we need to fill to make it truly circular and create that really fundamental transformation of our economies. Yeah. Well, look, thank you all very much indeed for being here. I think it was very worthwhile. I want to also thank the audience out there for watching this. I hope you learned something. And also, if you are talking to your members of parliament or other people about the environment, about the future of your children or whatever it's going to be, say to them, what are you doing about enabling materials from wastewater to actually be turned back into useful economic products for us all? Thank you very much indeed.